Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk of WilksWorld.com, and I am so incredibly grateful that you are taking the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Friends, at the D-Rate the Hate podcast, it's all about bettering the world one attitude at a time. See, we did not create the hate, but with your help, we can derate the hate. That all starts with gratitude and personal accountability. We cannot control everything that happens to us in life, but we can control how we react to it. How we act, how we react, no matter what happens to us, how we react to it makes the difference. Friends, there is only one good thing about a bad attitude, and that is that we have the ability as individuals to change it. Here on the DTH podcast, we strive to bring you great guests and provide tools to do just that. Please be sure to share it with your friends, subscribe if you haven't done so. Ratings and feedback are always greatly appreciated. And with that, let's get to this week's episode. Most of you know how much I dislike labels and being placed in a box, because those boxes and labels are used to divide us, and yet one more divide that is not as often talked about is that generational divide. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about it today as I bring in my friend Manu Meel, who is the CEO of the Generation Z organization, Bridge USA. Now, Bridge USA is a youth-led, nonprofit organization that creates spaces on high school and college campuses for open discussion between students about political issues. Let's face it, political division is one of our biggest challenges in the United States today. Today's youth are being taught that tribalism is better than unity, and that having conversations across our differences is impossible. Manu and the good folks over at Bridge USA are currently located on several dozen college campuses and high schools all over the country, helping to change that mindset. Let's get right to this incredible DTH conversation with my friend Manu Meel from Bridge USA. Here we go. Manu Meel, thank you for joining me on the D-Rate the Hate podcast, my friend. So good to see you again.
Hey, Will, thanks for having me on, brother.
Bridge USA is obviously a great partner with the organization that I do so much work with, Braver Angels. And when we got an opportunity to meet in person at the Braver Angels convention back in July, it was a real treat for me because, you know, following what you've been doing, Manu, and you know, obviously we come from different generations, and seeing what you're doing with the organization, you and your colleagues, the Gen Z thing, and how that's going with Bridge USA and the college campuses and stuff like that. Very much a treat. Yeah. Very, very good to see you on the D-Rate the Hate podcast, my friend. So, Manu, talk to me first. Well, tell the DTH listeners, you know, who you are and what was the genesis of Bridge USA? How did that thing get started?
Well, first I gotta harp on one thing you said, which is the Gen Z thing. I was like, isn't everybody curious about the Gen Z thing? this alien generation that has struck America like an absolute scourge.
Right?
You know,
well, it's very foreign to a lot of people. They don't understand it.
I know, these generation zombies. Yeah, it was like the millennials were already weird, I hear, and now it's my generation. It's like it's getting weirder, and the one below me is Gen Alpha, and yeah, you know what's interesting is, for your listeners, again, just for quick context, as Wilk was saying, him and I met at the Braver Angels convention. The organization that you said, Bridge USA, essentially we have college and high school chapters across the country, and the focus, Wilk, is how do you help, again, the zombie generation, Gen Z, my beloved peers, have conversations across lines of difference. But importantly, I think it's about how we can equip and empower the next generation of young people, no matter where they are on the political spectrum, to just have community, just to be able to talk to each other, just to have campus experiences and dialogues. But putting that aside for a moment, what was really cool when you and I met was the most interesting part of our conversation, I would say, for anybody that's wondering, is not actually at the convention, but it was actually at the party after the convention, where I got to learn about you as a person. And that's my favorite part of my job is being able to understand the various different people that make up this country, our lives, our backgrounds, our stories. And that's essentially what we're all trying to do, right? Is humanize each other so that we can build common understanding.
No, that's absolutely right, and that understanding thing is so important, Manu, because one of the biggest things, whether it be the divide between me being a Gen X guy, or me and the millennials, me and Gen Z, or going the other direction, me and the baby boomers and stuff like that. It's We all get put into these boxes, and oftentimes people just don't understand what that entails or who that person is. And the biggest thing that I've always tried to work through with this podcast and so many of the different things that I do now in my life, whether it be my work with Braver Angels or my work with this podcast or just my real life work, what I do in my profession is I try to get a genuine understanding of who this person is. Who is this person that I am interacting with, and who are they as a person? What is it that really drives them? What can I do to help drive them to make them better? What can I provide in their environment to make them better? And that's why I love what you're doing, because when I hear from other people, maybe it's my peers, the people that I may run around with. I think Gen Z often gets a very bad rap because of what is so highly publicized about Gen Z. But I think the most important thing here, and the word that we got to keep on realizing, is understanding and conversations.
Yeah. I'll tell you and your audience is a secret. And the reason why our podcast, which we'll have to have you on, the hopeful majority, the reason why I call it the hopeful majority is because I think, yes, our generation gets a bad rap, but I think the specifics of our generation is actually specific to the same politics that we see across the country, which is, I think it's just a tiny minority of very loud people, and then a bunch of everybody else that has just given up and is disengaged, and then those people are the only ones getting the microphone, and then all you hear on college campuses or high schools are those loud people. I mean, tell me that's not exactly what our politics sounds like. It's people like you and I stay silent because our temperament is to be curious and to not shout from the rooftops, and to listen and to be introspective. Like, it doesn't come naturally, I think, to most people to be those loud people. And so our job is like, how do you empower that exhausted majority? And I figured, why call it exhausted? We should call it hopeful, because exhausted sounds bad.
No, I love the hopeful majority because, we talk about, and I've talked about it on my podcast before, and I've talked about it with, whether it be my conversations with Francis Collins or other high profile people, and they all say the same thing, right? It's like, there's these loud people, and what I say is that, why is it that the people that know the least say it the loudest, or people that want to help the least say it the loudest, because they're just out there to instill this fear, outrage, and grievance. But then there is this exhausted middle, or this exhausted majority. I like the glass half full thing. I like the hopeful majority thing, because that is a lot better, because I think there is a lot more of those people out there. And when people are constantly just paying attention to the bigger mouthpieces, the ones that are speaking the loudest with the most toxic and venomous thing, they get the impression that we are much more divided than we are. Now, that's not to say that I don't believe that polarization is. I think polarization is one of the great or most grave issues of our time. But that is because so many people get the impression that those loud mouthpieces are the majority, when I know that they are not.
Well, I think a lot about what brings somebody like you and I together, right? So I think what unites us is not necessarily policy issues. It's not necessarily that you and I sing Kumbaya and we're just a bunch of moderates. I mean, I'm sure you've got really strong beliefs. I've got really strong beliefs. We might agree on a bunch of things. We might disagree on a bunch of things. But I think what brings you and I together is not the typical left-right divide. I think what brings you and I together is this temperament. It's a mindset. Like, are we open-minded or are we closed-minded? Are we willing to be curious, or do we want to shut people out? Do we believe in hate, or do we believe in bringing people in so that we can solve our problems? I think that's the new divide. I think it's a question of the open-minded, hopeful majority opposed against the cynical, pessimistic minority. And the question becomes for me, when we're on these college campuses, Wilk, and when we're on high school campuses, it's not, we're having, very vocal liberal kids joining our college chapters across the country from New York and California. And then super conservative guys and gals from, Texas and Louisiana and Alabama. And when we bring them together in our national summit everywhere, man, it's so interesting. It's kind of like that Braver Angels convention that you and I were at, where what's uniting these people is, again, not ideas, but it's a vision. It's a vision for how. I think the new line again is not what we believe, it's how we believe. And like you right now, I know the listeners can't see us, but you've got the flag above you on your top left. And we've been divided throughout our country's history. I think the problem right now is that we don't know how to manage difference. And what I appreciate about what you're doing is trying to understand people that are different than us, not to sing kumbaya, but so that we can see each other. I have a question for you, actually. Why do you think it's so difficult for people to try and understand each other? Like what you said when you were opening this conversation was like, what you appreciate about this podcast is being able to talk to people and being able to understand the stories and understand their ideas. Why do you think that's so such in short supply today?
I think we've been conditioned to, well, I think it's a couple things, but I think the big thing is that people fear that which they don't understand. And we've been conditioned to not only fear that which we don't understand, but to not confront our fears. When we live in this society of, that may be uncomfortable, that may be dangerous, we've got to stay away from it. We can't confront what makes us uncomfortable. We don't want to do that thing that's outside of our comfort zone. Well, just like my friend Daryl Davis says, ignorance instills fear. What we don't understand, we're going to fear, and that fear then causes hate. That hate causes anger, and then anger leads to violence. Well, sometimes people they unconsciously they know that cycle is going to be there, so then they just stay away, right? They want to keep that not at arm's length. They want to keep it completely out of their life.
Do you think that's because of human nature? Do you think it's because, I mean, you're much more experienced than I have. You've lived life longer. What am I, like half your age? What's the situation?
I'm guessing probably close. But you're in your late 20s, right?
I'm 24. I'm 25. I'm barely 15, actually. It depends on who you ask. If you ask my sister, she'd be like, "This guy's 3, maybe pushing 5."
This guy is a child. He is a petulant toddler.
He's barely cutting it. But like, what do you think? Like, do you think it's because of human nature? Do you think? And I have a hypothesis I want to share with you, but I'm curious what you think given your life experience.
Yeah, so I think it does have something to do with human nature. I mean, that whole thing of fearing that which we don't understand. I think that's very much a human nature thing. I mean, that's as we're kids, right? I mean, kids are naturally scared of so many more things than adults that have encountered more things. And that's not to say all kids are all adults, but I think that's natural. Is we fear that which we don't understand. So as people get older and those that don't experience more things, if you talk about the urban versus rural divide or something like that, right? A lot of times people from a rural setting are very afraid of urban settings because their only comprehension of an urban lifestyle or an urban setting is what they see on the news. And what they see on the news is constantly if it bleeds, it leads. So it's constant car accidents, it's constant shootings, it's constant racial division within in the most, the ugliest neighborhoods. And so people believe that every square inch of every urban area in the United States is what they see on the news. Right. So they fear that, right? And they don't want any part of it.
it's a mosh pit. It's crappy food. It's sweaty. It's dirty. You know what's interesting about this is you had asked what got me going on this journey. So I was a pre-med student, Will. So I don't know if we talked about this before, but I had zero interest in politics or democracy. I didn't know any of this stuff. I'm an Indian person, and like there's two accepted career paths for somebody like me, right? It's like you're either like a doctor or you're an engineer. And what happened was I went to school at UC Berkeley, which is another interesting place to be in American society. And I showed up in second semester of our freshman year. The speaker came to campus, right? And his name was Milo Yiannopoulos. He was sort of this like kind of conservative. That doesn't really matter. It really was just a provocateur. He used to stir people up.
Provocateur is the best word to describe Milo.
And our mutual friend Monica Guzman calls it, conflict entrepreneurs, conflict profiteers, people that make money off of our ability to get angry at each other. And so he shows up to campus. I remember I was walking back from a math seminar, right? And suddenly helicopters are flying overhead and they're shouting in the distance. I was like, well, another day at Berkeley. It's it's Berkeley. We love protest. And I walked past this cafe window is shattered. Inside it says CNN UC Berkeley students protest free speech. And I was like, okay, this seems large. And actually the TV crew that was filming that was standing right next to me. And so for me, it was like the breaking of this fourth wall. The reason I bring up this story is it turns out those protests were the largest protests in Berkeley's history since the 60s and since MLK came to campus and the anti-war stuff in Vietnam. And the next day, me and some random people got together. We said, hey, like, this is crazy. Let's actually just create a space for these students to talk to each other. Like, let's just try to, again, to your point, let's maybe try to deconstruct people's immediacy to fear that which they don't know. We created this space, and here's my hypothesis on this. If you're willing to hear me out, let me know what you think.
Absolutely, man. So, this is our time.
Yeah. So basically, we hold this discussion event, and we invite the people that invited Milo, the students. We invited the students that were protesting Milo. We invited the crazy people from the outside of the campus that just jumped in and decided to also protest. We invited some of the school admin people. And I mean, people showed up to space and everybody's like armed, ready to have a conversation and fight each other, debate each other, and I mean, not armed literally, I mean, armed with ideas and armed with a conviction that like their side is better. And I mean, we're like freshmen. The only thing I've ever operated on is like a frog, and like the last thing I know is like you're putting these really tense people in a room with each other. And the only thing we did was the one instinct I did have was I traveled my entire life and I moved around a bunch. And so to your point, it's about stories. And so he said, you can participate as long as you share a story about why you believe what you believe today. So it was about trying to, again, help people see that if you voted for Trump, there might be a real grievance to it. Or if you voted for Biden or whoever at that time was Hillary in 2017, why are you voting for her? By the end of it, people left. Like there were some people that are teary-eyed. There are people that are opening up their like heart. And again, that to me was like, it's all about creating that social permission, man. It's all about creating the norms for society to incentivize us to actually listen to each other. And that's what these bridge chapters do now across the country. But that was like my little inkling on what you're talking about.
Well, I think what you've done there, Manu, is really showed people how to, before you are even starting the conversation, before you're coming out with what some people see as toxic and whatever, you're humanizing that person, right? You're allowing that person to speak and say, okay, share something about you, not just why you, or not just what you believe, but why you believe it. Yeah. What in your personal experience, what about you makes you believe this? And that's what's so important when we do the stuff that we do with Braver Angels and the conversations that we have and the things that I do. And I'll go back to the thing that I've been doing with the Truth and Trust Project with Dr. Francis Collins. A big reason we've been able to work through some of our differences is because we've had several conversations just learning about each other as people. There's so many people out there, Manu, who look at Francis Collins as some evil entity, right? Because whatever they believe, the nefarious intentions of Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins were, they're trying to depopulate the earth, or they're trying to make money, or they're, all these different things. But they really feel there's an evil entity in there behind these actions that were done. once you start to humanize somebody like you're talking about, once you give them an opportunity to show that not only do I believe this, because if you think about it, if you think about, like the news media, what you're seeing there on CNN or the things that you see, I don't care if it's CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, whatever the case may be, they take out that human element, right? They're just showing you the small snippets of the things that they know are going to, I call it fog, fear, outrage, and grievance, right? They're looking for that morsel that's going to instill fear. I know you talk about Milo Yiannopoulos. Milo Yiannopoulos and different other people. I think he was with Breitbart for a while, and whatever organization these people are with, they are often, and I call them outrage entrepreneurs, because that's what they're doing. They're looking for the fastest way they can either do fear, because fear's gonna keep people separated. Outrage also gonna keep people separated, and grievance keep people separated. It all comes back to the same thing: separation. How do we keep people who are different away from each other? Because once they start having conversations, see the humanity in the other person, then that fear starts to go away. That understanding that we were looking for in the first place starts to develop.
Yep.
Once that develops, the whole world becomes a different place.
And here's the secret: it is people in power, I think, want that world in which everybody's just part of one team or the other. There's no individuality, and it's easy, red, blue. That is easy. It's that right now, today, it is the easiest thing to win an election in the world. It is the easiest. All you got to do, there's no nuance, right? So it's how much more can I outflank the person next to me so that I can capitalize on your hate? Like, I think for the media companies, when everybody knows what the business model is, that means it's a very simple business model, right? That's simple.
Right.
It's when I know when I don't need to be paid by CNN to know their business model. It's not a crazy intellectual property. It's simple. You stir people against each other, you make money. If you do the love thing, you lose money. It's very easy. And I think
I'm in that boat.
Exactly. There you go. and the question becomes like, well, what are you going to do about it? And I think fundamentally, the thing that I wrestle a lot with in my head, and that's why I asked you whether or not it's a human nature thing, is when we're on these campuses and we're meeting these students, like one of my really good mentors once said, and he used to work very closely with Barack Obama. And by the way, for anybody that's just listening, I also have a lot of mentors that worked on the right, so don't worry about it. And I'll tell another story to counterbalance, okay? And this guy said, leaders can lead by either turning people towards each other or turning people against each other. And the question that I'm wrestling with today, Wilk, is like, which one is easier to do? Are they both equally possible? Is the hope, optimism, turning people towards each other, not again for kumbaya, but for common understanding, is that equally as difficult as turning people against each other? Is one easier? Human nature, I think it's a two-sided coin. You got love on one side, you got hate on the other. Is one side of that coin more weighted? Is it less weighted? Like, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Are humans, because today it certainly seems like we're much more easy to rile up than we are to bring people together. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. That's my big thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a phenomenal question. And I think I'll go back to what you said about the business model and people, they've come to realize that it is easier to keep people separated than it is to bring them together. The thing is, and this goes to something else that I say quite often, and you can tell me what you think of this, but one of the things that I talk so much about is once you are able to get people operating from a position of emotion rather than logic, you keep them more engaged. There was so many people in this country for so long that did not become engaged until they became enraged. And once they were enraged, I mean, that's how we got Donald Trump, I think. I mean, that's my opinion. But the whole thing about once you there's a couple pieces to this. Once you get people operating on an emotional level rather than a like an intellectual or that kind of thing, you are going to there's a much better chance. There's a much higher probability that they're going to make bad decisions. because most bad decisions in my experience in my life have come as a result of operating on emotion rather than logic. So I can only apply my life experience. You talked about, my life experience, me being twice your age. One of the biggest things that I've learned in my life, Manu, is do not operate on emotions. Do not allow my emotions to dictate my actions, because as soon as I allow my emotions to dictate my actions, very bad things happen. And it's one of these things where that model, because how if we don't get people with that fear, outrage, and grievance model, why do people like us that work in this call it depolarization space, right? Why is it so much more difficult to go viral and get things happening in the depolarization space than it is the fear, outrage, and grievance space? Because depolarization feels good, but it doesn't always keep people engaged. You get people pissed off, they're going to stay engaged because they want to see what's going to happen next. And not only are they going to see what happened next, that the endorphins you get from feeling good in depolarization is nothing like the endorphins you get from being, your blood pressure goes up, your face gets red, your ears get hot, you get mad about something, you're going to stay engaged because, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's a rush.
It's the difference between eating broccoli and eating barbecue chips. Fundamentally what we're doing is we're selling broccoli to the American people. And while yes, on and you know what the crazy thing is? We're not even boiling it or putting any salt or pepper on it. That's the thing. Is I think what we're bad at is, in some ways, I think the tragedy of this moment is that I think the people that are trying to divide us understand human nature better than the people that are trying to bring us together.
That's right.
I think that's what I've discovered over the past couple of years. Part of the reason why I started this conversation off with this notion that I think there's a new divide in our politics is because I do think, to an extent, we have to play that game. Mm-hmm. We have to play that game. The question is whether or not the tribe that we're building is so open that it is up to the person to not be in our tribe as opposed to our choosing for them to not be in the tribe. Mm-hmm. I think ultimately, this is something that I pushed Brave Angels on a little bit. John Wood Jr. and I had this conversation, I think May of last year. And I think, it would be crazy for us to envision a world in which it wouldn't be crazy. I think it's idealistic, but I'm a little practical in this manner. For the start of human history, we've always been in tribes. That's mm-hmm. our thing. We're social creatures driven by groups. And I think for us to try and succeed in this work, assuming that humans are not going to live in tribes, I think is just ahistoric. The question becomes whether or not, again, our tribe is so large and so open that it is up to you to not join it, right? Because mm-hmm. right now, to join the Republican and Democratic tribes, you got to pass ideological purity tests. You got to be this way or the other. You have to fit a specific mold. You have to lose your individuality. Our tribe, you can be yourself. You can love people. You can be open to people. You can critique people. But as long as you're open-minded, you're curious, you're willing to have that conversation, you're in a tribe. And we just have to be much better about being on the offense and being articulate. Because if we don't, again, understand human nature, I think we're just going to be toiling in obscurity, serving people raw broccoli. And that's a bad recipe.
It is. But a great analogy. Because I think, when we think about the tribes, and I think people often get mistaken when we talk about, depolarization and you'd said earlier, kumbaya or whatever, or I don't know if it was you or somebody else that I was talking to, they think it's all, everybody's got to go
along to get along,
and this and that and blah, blah, blah. But that's the point. It's not that. It's like the opposite of that, because as you just said, Manu, talking about the having to fit this mold to be within the Democrat Party now, or having to fit this mold. And this is one of the reasons, ever since I started following politics, the reason that I love or was more engaged with the Republican side of the perspective, right, or spectrum, is because I thought that was the and it always was until, say, the past 5 years, 6 years, whatever, the party where a diversity of ideas, a diversity of mindsets. You didn't have to walk lockstep, but if you agreed with 70% of what this particular political entity, politician, however you want to describe them, if that was good, I mean,
Yep.
because now I'm not having to just pick one side or the other, because I think more people, and this is something I've talked about on the podcast a number of times, I think more people right now are voting for voting against what they don't want, as opposed to voting
something.
They're running from something, which that's something that I've spoke out against for most of my adult life. You can't just, if you're making your life decisions because of running away from something rather than running towards something, you're typically going to make a bad decision again, because that is made on emotion. I had a friend ask me one time, she says, I think I'm thinking about moving to this other part of the country. What are your thoughts on that? I'm like, well, I mean, if that's what you want to do, that's great. Why are you doing it? Well, I really don't like it here, and this and blah, 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 kind of started going on. And I told her, I said, if the only reason you're thinking about leaving is because of what you don't like here, at that point it's just geography. You're just changing geography. You need to look at, because everything that you just told me was what was bad here. What's good there? Is there something going to be better there? I think about the same thing happens with politics, Manu, is if everything that is helping you make your political decisions is because you dislike what the other side is saying, we need to kind of focus on what we want, as opposed to spending so much focus on what it is we don't want or what we dislike.
I ain't no fully developed adult yet, but I would gamble and say that if we lived our lives the way we make political decisions, I think it would go insane. I mean, like, as you say, I have to ask you this, like, have you ever had a relationship with someone where you only get your way? Have you ever had a relationship with someone where 90% of the relationship is defined by you thinking about all they do poorly? Like, have you ever had a relationship in your life or a family? Has there ever been any successful family where every person in that family has no idea what the other person believes, but it's only basing it off of what their friends tell them about each other? Like, that's our politics. And I just don't understand why the adult population of the United States can't operate in politics the way they live their normal life.
Right.
Like, why is that?
And it's ugly. It's a very ugly business. And that lockstep mentality where people are now forced to, we think about, tribalism back in the day, right? And if you didn't walk lockstep with the tribal leadership, you were banished. And I just finished Jonathan Rauch's book, Constitution of Knowledge, right? And he talks in there about how did tribes start? What we're a communal creature. We have to be, or we operate better. We work better within tribes. But back in the day, you needed that tribe to survive. Mm-hmm. Because if you were banished from your tribe, if you were pushed out to the elements to live on your own, you were most likely not going to survive. I mean, it was once you were banished from the tribe, I mean, that was pretty much a death sentence. Yeah. It's not that way anymore. Yep. It's not that way. And you talk about, working within a family unit. And if there are, and I've known some people like this, and it's unfortunate because I've seen it, where maybe it's and I'm not gonna say it's isolated to maybe the mother or the father in the home or whatever, but where you may or may not have heard this before, but kids are to be seen and not to be heard. That used to be a thing that some people would live that way back in the day. Or a lot of people have been given this false perception that back when we used to be a society where the man was the provider for the home, and he would go out and work, and the mother would be the homemaker, they used to call them housewives, and which, call it a homemaker, call it a housewife, call it whatever, but they were under the impression, they've been given, in my opinion, a false impression that because the man was the breadwinner, that when he would come home, everybody else had to only listen to him. He was the main figure. Everybody else was to be seen and not heard, and they were going to serve him and whatever. I think that's nonsense. The point that I'm trying to make here is the households where it was a healthy and beautiful household, whether it's a mother working outside the home or not, or whether the mother is the one that's going out and she's the breadwinner and the father is home or whatever. No happy household, and this goes right to your point, Manu, no happy household only has one figurehead and everybody else has to keep their mouth shut and walk in lockstep with that head figure. None.
Yeah.
It's the households that listen to their kids at the dinner table at night. The mother and the father are not screaming at each other and constantly at each other's throats, and they have their own ways of thinking, and they're just constantly butting heads. They work as a cohesive unit together, each bringing ideas to the table and working together for a common goal.
Yep.
That's the beautiful family unit, right?
Yep.
So I guess that was a long way to go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's a great point, because it gets to the fact that somebody that's listening to this, and oftentimes the pushback we get on campuses and in society in general is like, well, let's say you're a conservative. Let's say somebody's a conservative. They'll tell me, well, great, family units are important. All that's great. But in politics, you can't be humanizing evil, like somebody like Francis. Why are you humanizing that? Right. Or let's say somebody's a liberal and listening to this and they say, why are you humanizing a fascist? Right. Why are you humanizing somebody that voted for Donald Trump? And I feel like ultimately the job that we're trying to do and the work that we're trying to do is lay the foundation from which, let's say you believe you're right. The only way you win your argument is by understanding why the other person believes what they believe. Like, that's the only way you win this argument. I mean, the question that I think we have to start asking people, and it's about going on the offense. When somebody says, why are you humanizing this person? The question that we should ask is not trying to answer that question. We say, what happens if we don't? You live in a society of 330 million people. We celebrate our diversity, and yet we don't understand the fact that for people that are different than each other to get along, they have to be able to manage their conflict. I mean, you come to my village in India, like back in northeastern Delhi, where you are definitely not being heard. And sometimes it's important, I mean, if my grandfather's going out to milk the cow, I don't need to be heard. Trust me, I just need to be a working hand. But like when I'm out there, and that, the fundamental challenge in a community like that is people don't ultimately have respect for each other in some ways. And here, if we want to build that society, we got to have respect, and that's what we got to do. So I appreciate what you're doing, and I think we just got to keep going on the offense. I think we're too much. We're like that. We're like the cleanup crew that's coming after, all of the shit that's falling off the truck, and instead what we've got to do is like, we have to actually divert the road. Like, we have to build the road. We can't just be cleanup crew.
Right. I want to go back to something you said there, Manu, because it's so important. The humanizing of those with whom we disagree, or it's really easy to dismiss everything somebody says when you say, well, that person's a fascist. Or it's really easy to dismiss everything somebody's going to say. This person is a Nazi. They're evil. Yeah. Or that person. Until you, and I mentioned Daryl Davis earlier, and then I've often talked about my friend Jeff Scoop on this podcast too, who used to lead the largest American Nazi movement that was out there, the National Socialist Movement, and one of the things that's come out of conversations with those two men specifically is the whole idea that if you instantly dismiss somebody as evil and you put them in a position where they will not engage in a conversation with you, that keeps that divide there. It keeps the ignorance factor there, but it also gives me or whoever the instant ticket, the instant pass to say that person's evil. I don't have to listen to anything that they say, because now that I know they're evil, there is nothing that they could say that has any validity in my life or any validity in the conversation. Now it takes away accountability on two different levels. And I talk about personal accountability so much. It takes away accountability on two different levels. When that person is evil, they are a monster. They are no longer, we can no longer, they really can't be accountable for what they're doing, because they're not human anymore. Going to that humanization level that you were talking about. They are no longer human. They are a monster. So now they're just out there. Well, there's something about them that we aren't even going to bring them into the conversation, because that's a monster. We don't have to do it. So now, and then I don't have to be accountable for not knowing anything about that person, because they're evil. They're a monster. So it takes away accountability from them, and it takes away accountability from me. And all it does is it increases that barrier. It increases that wall between us, and then goes right back to that same thing that I was talking about: ignorance, fear, hate, anger. And ultimately it ends up being warring tribes.
That's
right?
fascinating. That it takes away accountability. And by the way, when you come on the Hopeful Majority, and I think we'll just continue this conversation. I was just making a note of some of your friendships and people that you're friends with that you've learned from, like Francis Collins, to a Jeff Scoop, to a Daryl Davis. I mean, what's so interesting about what you're saying is that when you think about, nobody here likes hate. We're not working on, if we were working on this work and suddenly we realized that what the end point of this work is a world in which there's more hate, we wouldn't do it. Right. I think the fight that we're in right now is a question of how you battle hate. Right. And I think there's two theories of change. The first theory of change is what you're seeing in our politics right now from both sides, which is a zero-sum, win-at-all-cost mentality, which is it's almost an overreaction to what many people think is a 1939 moment in the United States. This idea that to eliminate hate, you eliminate the people that are there, right? That you have to win. There's no other chance. The theory of change that I think you and I are advancing, and it goes to the point of accountability, is when you actually study the rise of fascism in 1939, you study genocidal dictators, you study, Saddam Hussein in Iraq. The fact is that when you isolate hate and you think that you are not giving it a platform, it only further festers. And I think it only drives further resentment. And again, this is my sort of hypothetical understanding of history, but I think, again, it's about going on the offense first. We have to make the case that this method of engagement, listening, open-mindedness, curiosity, not shutting people out, including those that are hateful, is not an attempt to lay the foundation for them to continue to fester, but it's in fact a way to bring them to us, right? And I think that's what we've learned over the last 8 years.
No, and that's absolutely right. And in those conversations with Daryl Davis and Jeff Scoop is by keeping them outside and not listening to them, and it just makes them more stronger, more resentful, and you will never bring anybody into your camp. You will never, and it's not about necessarily changing somebody's mind or mindset, but you will never build a sense of civility between anybody if you continue to call them a monster and push them away. You have to figure out a way to bring that person closer to you, or they are just never going to listen. The importance of them listening is, again, it's because if they aren't listening and they're not at the table, what happens? They will continue to grow that work. They will continue to grow that movement. The people, it gives them the ammunition to say, see, they're coming after us. They're coming after us. Join me. Yep.
See, they're coming. It fuels their hate.
Yeah, it does. It fuels the hate. It's just like putting fuel on the fire. So Bridge USA. I know we're getting close to the end of our time here, Manu, and this has been a fascinating conversation. One that I knew the few conversations you and I were able to have back in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania in July, we could continue to have conversations for hours. I know. So just for the DTH listeners, Bridge USA. How
Mhm.
how can people get involved? What's the biggest thing that you've got going on nowadays? Where can
Yep.
they find you guys? And then also talk a little bit about the Hopeful Majority podcast, where people can find that as well.
Yeah, and I'll be super brief because I think if you're still listening to this conversation, you're perfect to join organizations like Braver Angels and Bridge USA. I think the fact is ultimately that we're a college and high school based organization. If you look at the most important social movements in the United States, from civil rights to you look at the climate movement on the left, you look at the gun movement on the right, you think about different political campaigns, they start in high schools and colleges because young people don't have a lot of hard political power, but they have a lot of soft cultural power. And I think fundamentally what we're doing is we're empowering young people to be able to have those conversations. So if you're an adult and you're listening to this and you got that, you've got a student, a young person, you've got kids in your family, and they're either in high school or college, refer them to us, bridgeusa.org. And that's where they can actually start a chapter, and we'll walk them through the entire process. If you want to hear more conversations like this, you come to the Hopeful Majority as well, where we have dialogues. We've got Andrew Yang coming up soon. Depending on when this releases, he might already be up. We'll have some presidential candidates out there. But here's the last thing I'll say, Wilk, and putting aside Bridge USA, Braver Angels, all of our organizations, everything. I think, again, it goes back to our point about understanding human nature. We have to paint a vision and drive purpose for why this work matters. And here's my theory of the case. My theory of the case and my thought is that right now the United States is attempting something that's never happened in the history of humanity. You've got a society of 330 million people, all of whom who look different than each other, that have different beliefs, that have different religions, that have different ideas. You've got one of the most heavily armed societies in the history of humanity. You've got a society that is trying to achieve something that has never happened before. Imagine if we could pull it off. That's powerful. You're listening to this right now, and you're susceptible to hate just like me. We're susceptible to anger. We're susceptible to frustration. But also, what has driven history is being susceptible to vision and ambition. And we're trying to attempt something that allows people to look and say, that's the best of mankind. That's the best of humankind. Like, that's why I care about this work. And when we're with these students and high schools, colleges, we're even engaging on middle school students, we're looking at postgraduates, people are craving purpose. They're craving meaning. They want to be a part of something. And again, the question is, do you want to be a part of something that turns people against each other? Or do you want to be part of something that is trying to fulfill the most ambitious experiment in the history of humanity? 330 million people, all heavily armed, all looking different than each other. History would tell you that's a recipe for conflict. Let's prove them wrong. Like, that's the type of shit we got to start doing. That's inspiring.
Very.
And it's important.
Very important, very inspiring. Manu Meel, what an incredible conversation. I'm already looking forward to the next one, my friend. And
hey, thanks
keep on doing what you're doing, brother. It's awesome.
You too. Appreciate you.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the Derate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.